John Ondrasik, Five for Fighting, singer-songwriter, and friend of the Jewish people and of Israel, as well as a great American patriot. Great to see you here at the Republican Jewish Coalition. It's their 40th anniversary. Breitbart is here. I want to just take you back to 2009, which is the first time I actually ever saw you perform. And that was the night I actually met Andrew Breitbart. I was in California. It's a long story how I ended up there. I was in school. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I got invited to this Gary Sinise event in Agora Hills or something like that.
Yeah.
And you performed 100 Years. It still, to this day, is one of the greatest nights of my life. And at the end of the whole performance, I met Andrew Breitbart.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, wow.
That's how far back you and I go, although you probably don't have the memory of it that I do. But talk to us about your overall political journey. Why did you come out as a conservative, and how have you managed to stay active in Hollywood when you're so publicly committed to conservative causes and people are so mean about it?
You know, I've never been a super political person, kind of like Andrew, frankly. He wasn't really a political guy. He was like a moral guy. And I was a Reagan fan. You know, I kind of grew up, my parents, you know, were kind of moderate Republicans, had a family business, had to make a payroll, had to pay taxes, middle class, had a wonderful childhood, and just kind of, you know, appreciated the Reagan doctrine. And then became a big supporter of our military. That's kind of been the honor of my career, to support our troops, to write songs about their experience, to go around the world, sing for them. I have a great love for freedom. And that's always kind of been my backbone, but I've never really stood on a soapbox. You know, like you know, I think we kind of have a certain apathy and annoyance with celebrities who stand on their soapbox and lecture us. But I have written songs about freedom. I have written songs about our values. I wrote a song called The Last Great American about John McCain 25 years ago because, you know, to me, his service in Vietnam was something that should be honored always. And only in the last few years have I become a little more active with the music, you know, writing a song about the Afghan withdrawal, Ukraine, which some on our side don't like. And then, of course, after October 7th, I think, first of all, I think at this stage of my career, it's easier probably, to be honest. I would hope I'd be writing these songs in my 30s. I'm not sure I would. But I really believe it's the battle for civilization, and the arts has a huge role to play that very few, especially on our side, understand.
Great songs can transcend politics. Andrew and I used to sit in the office and listen to music, and we had this great discussion once about the Australian band Midnight Oil.
Yeah.
And we both loved Midnight Oil. And our lament was the same, was that they're so left-wing. Yeah. And then Andrew said, why are all the great bands left-wing? Yeah. So obviously there are conservative musicians as well, and there are musicians who became more conservative.
Yeah.
I think of the Ramones, you know, starting out parodying or criticizing Reagan and then becoming more conservative over time. But what is the environment like in Hollywood generally right now, and in the music industry in particular? Is it as conformist as it was during the Biden years, the years of cancel culture, or is it starting to open up a little bit more?
I think it's more so.
More conformist now?
I think it's never been more locked. And you certainly see that with the aftermath of October 7th. After October 11th, after 9/11, every icon pretty much was on that stage at Madison Square Garden at the Concert for New York, condemning Osama bin Laden, standing up for America. But since October 7th, crickets.
Right.
And there's no good explanation for that. It is, I think, the sign of a broken world. When the arts are broken, the world is broken.
Wow.
And so many of these artists that have laid their claim as the human rights leaders, Live Aid, Concert for New York, Sun City, the Springsteens of the world, even Bono, their silence has been deafening. And I'm going to talk about this tomorrow when I talk a little bit about arts and the culture. I truly believe if on October 8th, 2023, the artists of the world stood up and said, release those hostages. And if Hamas didn't release them, did a We Are the World for the hostages. And if that didn't happen, say, we're not going to play until the Red Cross visits those hostages, we would not be here. The BBC would not be a mouthpiece for Hamas. Certainly our college campuses would still be raging, that's going on. But it is, the collapse of the arts is one reason why the culture has collapsed. And it breaks my heart as an artist. Many of those folks are my colleagues, some are my friends.
You know, you mentioned Bono, and I think it was a few days after October 7th he was here performing at the Sphere,
Yeah.
and he changed some of the lyrics
Yeah.
of the song. But then, I think a few months ago, he said something on the other side of the issue. There's just no ability to handle the complexity of what's going on. Like, if you don't want to be pro-Israel, okay,
Yeah.
but it's not a matter of just becoming anti-Israel, which a lot of people seem to be doing. Write something complex, write something that captures the humanity. You're right, nobody's doing that. And is that reflective of our political culture more generally, or is it something specifically about Israel that people don't like?
Well, certainly, again, I think the wokeism certainly has infected the younger artists, just like our youth.
Okay.
So the younger artists, the Macklemores, they've been indoctrinated, the oppressor of the oppressee.
Right.
But many folks of our generation, they know better. Many of the executives in Hollywood and the music industry are Jewish. Ari Emanuel, the most powerful man in Hollywood, is Jewish. They know better. There's really no better explanation. They're cowards. They're 1938. They're people who could change, move the needle, that choose not to because they're afraid maybe to lose their clients, maybe to not be able to go to the right party. So it really is an exercise in how the Holocaust happened. We always ask ourselves, how could that ever happen?
Right.
Well, we're seeing it. And you see it. I talked to Sharansky when I was in Israel, and he said something to me that really stuck with me. He said 20 years ago somebody asked him, what's the biggest threat to Western civilization? 20 years ago. He said, American academia. So this has been going on for a long time. And the arts, our colleges, are always the front line for these kind of Marxist movements. And the fact that nobody's standing up to that, I think, is very scary. But I've also seen, through my song OK, through our new version of Superman, that just with a couple tweets in a song, you can fight back. And I think we're going to continue to do that. And I do think the tide has turned. I think with the hostages being released, Trump, Rubio, thank you, it's a miracle. I do think the tide has turned because at the end of the day, we're on the right side. We are the good. We are the good guys, no matter what anybody says. It's very clear. There's no gray area between Hamas and Israel. So I think in a weird way, I'm kind of optimistic. Maybe I'm naive. But the arts has to be part of this culture war, Joel. Without it, we will lose. Because Israel always wins the war. They always lose the propaganda war. The only way you win the global war is with the arts as well.
So you put that into motion when you performed at Hostage Square, now Freedom Square or Freed
Yes.
Square they're calling it. And Trump got the hostages out, 20 living hostages. Obviously there were many more that died,
Yeah.
but nobody really thought that was possible. You contributed to that. I mean, did you think that that was going to be the outcome when you joined? Obviously you hoped something like that would happen, but how did you feel when it actually happened?
When we did this video with Edith Oell for her son Alone, the new version of Superman, we would always come out and say, we believe one day I'm going to sit at the piano with Alone.
Wow.
We would always say, we pray for them to come home, and they're going to come home. Because you have to say that. You have to say that. In my gut, did I believe it? I said it's possible. But, I was working with Rachel Goldberg when Hirsch was murdered. I thought you might get a few out. I never thought we'd get them all out. What Trump and Rubio did is truly a miracle. And, I just got off tour. And my first gig 2 weeks ago in Arizona was the first night playing Superman with Alone home. And it was sublime. I never thought it would happen, the joy. But of course you also feel the suffering of those whose loved ones didn't come home, right? And you feel the sufferings of the innocents in Gaza that Hamas caused. So there's so many emotions, but to see Alone, I saw just, I don't know if you saw it, there was a video on Israeli television with Alone playing and everybody singing.
Yeah.
And it just, I think for us who fight the good fight every day, we haven't had many moments to celebrate in the last couple of years. I think we had the election, of course.
Right.
The hostages are not out without the election. But I think for all of us who've been so emotionally connected with the hostage families, it takes you a step closer to God.
Do you ever think you might play with Alone? Would you have him on stage and play with him?
I would do anything they want with that family. I think a lot of people have been wanting that. I think, again, I've spoken to Edith through texting. Alone had surgery on his eye. These guys have been basically in a cage for 2 years.
Yeah.
The healing is going to be a lifetime. So whatever I can do to help that with them or all the hostages, I'm open to doing. Certainly if he wants to sing a song, come up, I'm there for all the hostages, their family. I'm there for Israel. That would be wonderful, but all that matters is that he's home and that the others are home as well.
You've been targeted by anti-Semitism since you joined this fight.
Yeah.
Of course, the irony is that you're not Jewish.
Right.
And you took an interest in this cause. So tell us why you find Israel's cause so compelling, and also what it's been like to be attacked by some of the trolls and some of the haters out there.
Well, this might be a weird answer, but I don't find it super compelling. I find it easy. People don't come up to me and say, well, why did you rescue Afghans from Afghanistan after the withdrawal? Well, because we abandoned our allies we were supposed to protect to the Taliban. Why do you go to Ukraine and support Ukraine? I go, well, Putin's a bad guy, and he's trying to reconstitute the Soviet Union. Why do you support Israel? October 7th, if Hamas is not evil, nothing is. So to me, these are all moral messages. It has nothing to do with religion, it has to do with humanity. And Israel, they are the front line. Thank God Trump got elected, because at least they have backup now. At least the cavalry's coming. Israel is really the front line for civilization right now. This little country, 50 million people, are basically fighting for all of us. Because, my daughter went to NYU. I see it everywhere. I have to hire extra security for my tours. Folks that support Palestine don't have to do that.
Right.
So it's kind of like, it's a fight that I think, if you just limit it to like a religion or a culture of people, I think people are missing the point. This is for everybody, for everybody's kids, including the kids in the Middle East, including the Gazan kids. You want them to grow up with a life of hope and promise. They don't have that right now. So I think it's an easy thing to do. And thank God for Netanyahu, thank God for the Jewish people, thank God for the IDF, thank God for you, thank God for Breitbart, thank God for everybody in this room over there who's fighting the good fight.
As you talk about all these conflicts where you've taken an interest, I really can hear the Reagan philosophy coming through, because Ronald Reagan really was about helping our allies and standing with Eastern Europe against the Soviet Union and reaching out to anyone who was on the side of freedom. We've got the situation now where we've got rising anti-Semitism, first on the left and now on the right.
Yeah.
And it's all happening this week as the Republican Jewish Coalition is coming together and people are talking about it. What's your take on what's going on right now?
It's certainly disturbing. You just wonder how much is it entrenched? Certainly on Twitter, everybody's freaking out, and the Heritage comments were frankly disgusting. He walked it back a little bit. But the Tucker thing is dangerous and scary. He has a lot of acolytes. He's a smart guy. I think the Candace thing is just a nut job. The difference between us and the other side is most of our anti-Semitic kind of right-wing woke rights, they're pundits. They're trying to build an audience. They're trying to grift on audience. They're not elected. We have a couple kooks. But the left, they're the leaders of their party. So again, I think we have to stand strong against this noise. I think we have to stamp it out. And I think people are doing that. The leaders of the party, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, everybody's, I think the majority of conservatives are calling out that wing. But it is dangerous. And we've seen it grow. And again, I've been so surprised with the last 4 or 5 years, I don't want to predict anything. So I think we have to be aware of it. And I think it's important that J.D. Vance does come out and say some things, though.
I can't understand how we got here in some ways. I mean, I understand these things, I think, better than
you do.
Many people, but I still can't really understand how we got from a point where Tucker Carlson was inviting Andrew Breitbart to dinner at Bill Ayers' house. He won that lottery or whatever the contest was. And they were so close. Andrew Breitbart was very pro-Israel. Tucker was very pro-Israel.
Yeah.
And now Tucker is trashing Israel, inviting anti-Semites like Nick Fuentes on his program. Candace Owens and I were in Jerusalem together for the opening of the embassy in 2018. Now she's off on a completely different path. I mean, what happened? And people are all asking me, is it that people are paid money? Is it social media engagement, the clicks? Like, what is going on? What changed?
Bill Kristol's voting for Mandami.
Yeah, Kristol's voting for Mandami. I mean,
so he was kind of my guru for 15 years. I wish I had a good answer for you. I don't. I don't think it's money. Tucker doesn't need money. He has plenty of money. Is it wanting to be kind of a voice in the culture and kind of be out on your own? Maybe. Maybe it's just people losing their mind. I don't know. Sometimes people go crazy. I wish I had a better answer for you. But I do think it's kind of our obligation to stand up to it, and when they go completely overboard, to let them sink.
I want to come back to something you mentioned a few moments ago about J.D. Vance. He had an appearance at Ole Miss with Turning Point USA, and he was asked many questions, some of which Nick Fuentes later claimed credit for. He said his followers were in the audience.
Right.
And I think it was a tough spot for Vance to be in because he didn't want to get into a fight with the audience. At the same time, some of his answers were criticized as being less than satisfactory on questions of anti-Semitism. What would you like to see him say?
Again, I think Marco Rubio and Donald Trump have been very clear about the 100% commitment to Israel and fighting anti-Semitism. I would like J.D. Vance to basically echo that, and frankly condemn Tucker. I know it's hard. In some ways, politically it may be hard. He wants to be president. He's probably going to be the nominee. There's a constituency there. But I think at some point, especially for Jewish Americans, he needs to say something that is clear, unequivocal, and condemn this growing movement. And it needs to come soon, because I'm starting to see a lot of Marco Rubio 2028 pictures on a lot of Jewish feeds, because they're very angry, and I don't blame them.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here, because I don't necessarily disagree.
Yeah.
But I would say, in his defense, he just got back from Israel a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he had a great visit there.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of criticisms here and there, maybe deservedly so, because some Israeli politicians put some things up for a vote that they shouldn't have, that they wanted to take advantage of the situation. But he might say, I just visited Israel. I was there for three days or 4 days, and I took my family. What more do you want from me? I mean, okay, I got asked some tough questions. It was a tough spot. I could have handled it a little bit better. But do I really need to keep proving myself?
Yeah.
Well, how would you answer that?
And I understand politicians. They'll answer 1,000 questions, and you'll focus on the one that makes you mad.
Right.
But I think it all comes down to Tucker. I think it comes down to Tucker. He has a relationship with Tucker. Heritage has a relationship with Tucker. They really don't want to cut that cord. And I understand that. They're probably good buddies, and Tucker stood up for him. But I think it's kind of like silence is loud. And I think it really comes to those two things. I think again, do I think he's anti-Semitic? No. Do I think he's going to cut off Israel if he's elected? No. But again, it's a very sensitive time. It's a very sensitive time. And what you don't say and what you do say, especially on this issue, I can think of anything going on right now, maybe the shutdown, that people pay more attention to. So I think he'll get it right. And I think, looking forward, I think a Vance Rubio ticket would be incredibly powerful. And I campaigned for Marco Rubio, so I'm a big fan. So again, I think we'll get it right, but I understand the criticism. And but he's a very smart guy, and I will give him a little bit of benefit of doubt, but I think at some point he needs to address that.
Finally, the topic of creating more cultural products with a conservative edge is one that conservatives often talk about. You're a rare example of someone who actually does it. But what is the secret to doing that, whether it's music or movies? How do conservatives tap into successful arts projects without hitting people over the head with political views? I mean, what is the secret sauce there?
That's a good question. I think, first of all, it has to be good. It has to be quality. I know Angel Studios is having some success. I know other folks are making some movies. But I also think you can't worry about the fallout and the apathy or disdain from the media or from the critics. That's very hard to do. in this kind of world where you always want to be, you grew up wanting to be on the cover of Rolling Stone, and then you realize Rolling Stone's kind of the enemy, But again, I think it takes courage, and I think it takes work, it takes support. There's very few record companies that want to promote conservative artists. But also I think we're in an age where you can do it now. 20 years ago, you couldn't. Anybody can start a YouTube channel and put a song up, and it can take over the world. Look at our friend John Kahn.
Right.
Look at our friend John, aspiring songwriter for 30 years, has the #1 song in the country, and that song will be played for decades for all different causes. Fighter. Yeah. So it's like, I think keep swinging and understand that we shouldn't be intimidated. It's like Andrew always said, he was the happy warrior. And those days that you mentioned from the Friends of Abe dinners and concerts, there was so much joy.
Right.
At the end of the day, we are the party of joy. Jewish people are the people of joy. And it's kind of like, we shouldn't run away from that. We should embrace that. And I think also the more people that do it, it gives permission, it gives kind of inspiration. And I do think the whole youth culture is rethinking what they've been taught. You start to see many kind of young men moving to the Conservative Party. I think the left has gone so nuts. People are rethinking the worldview. And where is that going to show up more and more? The arts. So it'll be fascinating to see over the next 10 years.
John Ondrasik, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Breitbart at the RJC.
All right, buddy.